Creative Mind, Exploring the Art of Thinking by Forrest Kinney. Relationship, Part 1. Years ago, I was splitting wood for a friend who had hurt his back. It was hard work, but after I took a break for lunch, it became a lot easier. I said to my friend, "Boy, this batch of wood is so much softer." Well, he laughed and said, "No, while you were eating, I sharpened that dull axe you were using." I had assumed that the wood was different, that it was softer and the axe was the same. But actually, the wood was the same and the axe was different. It was sharper. I had experienced an obvious difference, and I wrongly placed the cause for this change on one side of the relationship and not the other. I knew at the time that this revealed an important concept to explore for understanding relationships and communicating about them. So let's explore this idea further and lay some groundwork for thinking about relationships in a more accurate and intricate way than usual. I call it relationship thinking. Suppose I have a boat, and you have a boat, and we're out in the ocean. There's no land to refer to and no GPS. So over time, we will see the other boat as the same distance apart, or closer, or further away. I'm going to assume that my boat is staying in the same place. Well then, it's easy to explain the changes I see. When there is no change in the distance between us, you are also staying in the same place. When there's more distance between us, it's because you are moving away. And when there's less distance, it's also because you are moving closer. By assuming that I'm the one who stays the same, it makes it clear and quite easy to explain the various distances apart. It's all because you are moving or not moving. Now, suppose you do the same thing. You assume that your boat is staying in the same place. Then it's also easy for you to explain what's happening. The same distance apart means that I'm also not moving. Less distance means that I am getting closer. And more distance means that I am moving away. So I'm doing all the moving. Each of us assumes that we are the stationary ones and the changes we see are all the other person's doing. Now suppose somebody is watching our two boats from another boat and sees us both moving. Less distance apart means that we're both moving toward each other. More distance apart means we're both moving away. And the same distance means that we're both moving in the same direction at the same time. In these three cases, we're both changing simultaneously. So what we have just seen is 9 different states of relationship. This means if you and I are getting further apart, it could mean one of 3 things. You are moving away from me, I'm moving away from you, or we're both moving away from each other at the same time. If you and I are getting closer, it could also mean one of 3 things. Either me moving closer to you, or you moving closer to me, or both of us moving closer simultaneously. And finally, if we're staying the same distance apart, it could be that I'm moving away and you're moving closer, or you're moving away and I'm moving closer, or neither one of us is moving. With 9 options, it's understandable why we tend to assume that I am the unchanging one. Then the complexities of the situation become very simple to understand. The problem is that this crude and simplistic thinking makes the actual relationship much more complicated. I mean, it inevitably causes a lot more arguments and confusion. So suppose one person starts to feel that the other person is losing interest in the relationship. They're moving away. This person naturally assumes that he or she is the same, and it's the other person who's moving away. Yet once we bring in relationship thinking, the person has to ask themselves, well, maybe I'm really the one losing interest and pulling away. Or perhaps we're both losing interest. This kind of inquiry allows that these other possibilities may also be true, and it doesn't place blame on the other person. The minute we start blaming the other, communication breaks down. Let's look at another common situation. This represents two friends or two partners who generally get along. We'll call this person A and this person B. One day, A says to B, "You are being so unkind today." Well, this may be the case, but it could also be that A is just extremely sensitive this particular day, and B is just being his or her usual self. Or it could be a bit of both, or a lot of both. A healthy relationship depends on a kind of healthy thinking that allows for all these possibilities and doesn't assume the changes in the relationship are because of the other person. Otherwise, we're back in the blame game. All this relates to everyday perceptions. This woman, for example, might say that the water is much warmer today. In doing so, she is naturally assuming that her foot is the same. But it could be that her foot is colder today, and therefore the same water temperature just seems a lot warmer. After all, she's not really feeling the actual temperature of the water. She's feeling the changes in the sensations of her foot. Here's a simple way to show that we're not as constant as we like to believe. Assume you have 3 bowls of water. The closest one has hot water, the furthest one has cold water, and the one in the middle is somewhere in the middle. If you put your hand in cold water for a while, then the water in the middle bowl will seem hot. If you put your hand in the hot water for a while, then place the same hand in the water in the middle, the water will seem cold. This shows how our organs of perception are not constant, though we usually assume they are. Relationship thinking reminds us to consider that the water may be warmer today, my foot may be colder, or both. Or that the other person may be changing, or I might be, or both. Every relationship has 2 sides that are in a state of flux. I think healthy relationships and healthy thinking about them depend upon always keeping this in mind. In Part 2, we will explore how this way of thinking can lead to a profound sense of personal freedom and empowerment, a sense that we can change our world.